Tree, I'm wondering if you'll build on that and share sort of the diversity at your school, not only of the students but also of the staff, and tell us a little bit about how those levers for change matter, right? That the staff represents the student community in some ways.
Yeah, very similar to Erica's school. Our school is a Title I school, which is low-income families and students, and also we have a very big diversity of our school. About like 86 different languages speaking at the school. So we celebrate our diversity every day. When we come to school, we encourage students to speak their own languages and also share their culture so that we all celebrate together almost every day in the classroom and everywhere on the campus. Our school have about like 2,000 students and over 100 teachers and staff. So very big one and very diverse. We have many programs that support staff and teachers and students and families as well. We have every departments, we have PLC meetings at least once a week, talking about how to know the student know and how do we improve our teaching practice so that the student in good hands. We create the test. We're talking about curriculum, modifying, and so on, so on. There are many things that we work together with the PLCs in each department. And sometimes we have all departments together to share the concerns. For example, math departments working with the science department and talking about the standards, like what the skills the student can bring from math to science or from science to math. And also, we have equity meetings almost every week. We open this one for all staffs, teachers, and students, parents come together. Even though during the pandemic, we have virtual meetings, invite everybody comes and share the concerns, everything, like almost like we create like a circle we call circle, and then everyone share their concerns about issues or about things that going on at their family, at the school, at the community. Also, the school and district support the staff by creating professional developments. We offer a free English endorsements, encourage teachers to learn strategy about helping English language learners to improve their skills and academic skills at our school. The challenge, most challenges that we got at the school is about the time consuming in terms of curriculum time frame, because of helping our refugee students who came from with different backgrounds of knowledge and academic skills. Some students did not have a formal education in their refugee camp and or other countries. So they come to the classroom with their big gap. So we need to step back and to fill in the gap. Therefore, very much pressure on teachers and staff in terms of meeting standards and in terms of testing schedule. So we are facing with those challenges, how to meet the standard, how to reach to our goal in certain time. And in the meantime, filling the gap. So that's the most challenging that we face, and we are trying to overcome that.
Tree, thank you for setting us up to talk specifically about the PGP PLC, because you've highlighted what the challenges are. So even when the school is offering supports through department level PLCs and equity committees, there are still these larger concerns around refugee education that teachers may need more time and space and different perspectives to grapple with. So I want to turn to Hannah, and Hannah, ask you about the challenges that your colleagues have faced in working with students of refugee backgrounds, and how the PGP PLC structure can help to address some of those, given what Tree was just sharing.
Yeah, I think one thing that even like I'm thinking about my own practice with refugee students, and I think a lot that came up in our conversation was a little bit about like access to resources came up quite often. That was like a common running theme. And I'm thinking like from a teacher lens and what they have shared and my experience too, the logistical part of it can be really challenging because one thing that we don't have teachers, it feels like, is time and trying to coordinate resources, like thinking about even schools like Tree where the resources are available. And even I'm coming from an elementary lens, but even secondary is more isolated than elementary, but coordinating even between main general ed classroom, myself as an instructional coach, the front desk, cafeteria, family engagement, who is doing what have they received, who's talked to the family. It is really hard to get everyone on the same page. Like that is just the reality of back and forth emails. And I think that could be really challenging to be all together with the family and understanding. I also think it takes time to know families. It takes time to build trust. And so part of that is like it's going to take time to know what they need, and we want to rush that process to get them out of our good intent to get them what they need right away. But it takes time, and we have to respect their own experiences and their relationship with schools. And we are like I am a stranger to them, and so just allowing for that time, I think, is something I'm thinking about from a coaching lens. And it doesn't really speak so much to this specific PGP who really desires to want to work with and support refugee students. But I think even before we get to the logistic part, I think it's the fact that sometimes refugee communities are positioned as a challenge and as a problem. Like the first thing is kind of thinking about what supports they need, what challenges will I have in serving them well. And it makes me wonder and think about what would our education system be like if our first question was like, what are the assets that they're bringing, and how can we change, like, what are they adding to, what am I learning from them? What can we add? And so that's just kind of I think the beginning point in some ways for some schools and staff. I also think because a lot of the maybe people who work in schools don't come from refugee backgrounds or may not have had a wealth of experience, it can be kind of daunting. There's just so much unknown, and that could create a lot of anxiety. Like it's just teachers want to be there for their students, but not knowing where the place to start is. It feels like a million things you got to do. And I think one thing that the PGP is really helpful for is to make that abstract of like all of the things I feel like, and kind of know or assume I think I need to do, kind of dial it in to say like, I'm going to make it concrete and come up with one goal because I know this is one step, and helping the educators to see like, this is not the one time and the only shot that you're building, and you will do this every year. And it creates a kind of, I think, resiliency and a hope and a motivation. And of course, it's the community part of it. Like I've done the PGP alone and done it in community. And I think doing it in community, all who have the same interest, is incredibly supportive and helpful to actually continue to move forward with your practices. I think I answered that.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. There was so much in that to work with. I'm going to throw the ball to you, Marisa, to see how you want to build on what Hannah was just sharing, and maybe to reflect on what are some of the things that you learned as a facilitator from the participants in your PGP. So Hannah was saying there are all these pieces, but when each person focuses on one thing, they can move that piece forward. So what did you take away from your community as a facilitator?
Well, I would like to put the pieces together. So from what Tree said, we do have, I would say there's strength in diversity, but but then it takes time to know each individual and to foster that partnership with families. But how do we do that? To me, it's like being aware of my role, being aware of my position. Like I know that my strength as an educator is really to foster this inclusive community. And so looking at each educator and knowing what they're bringing, what assets they're bringing, and how I can build a coalition with these teachers. And that's how we started this PGP. Like I know and I recognize that there are strengths in our community. I know that Tree is bringing a lot of assets to our community, like our students do. It's recognizing the assets and strengths that our students are bringing and really tapping on those strengths. How can we? It's same thing. Whatever we do with our teachers, it should be the same thing that we do with our students. It's modeling, being aware of who we are, our position in the community, in our education system, and leveraging that position to create something that we think sometimes is impossible. If we look really deeply and see who is around us, who is our student, what assets they're bringing, who are our teachers, what assets they're bringing, if we combine them together, I think there's change.
Fabulous. Thank you. And what each of you are speaking to is this community aspect, right? And how important the community is and learning within a community. And one of the things I'm wondering, and maybe each of you in turn would be willing to comment, how do you evaluate inclusion and or equity in your learning communities, whether that's with your students or with your colleagues in professional practice? What are your tools for evaluation of inclusion and equity in your work? Erica, Marisa, Tree, or Hannah, anyone who wants to jump in?
Okay. Well, I'm going to say again, it's awareness. I would say because I'm aware of who I am and my connection to my community, then I started looking my community as I am. Like who is not speaking, who is not at the table, whose voice is not heard, and who are talking. And so I always have a strong, or I would say clear lens of seeing how system works. And so when I see that, even in my classroom, when I see that there are students who are quiet, I make sure that I provide a condition where my students share their thinking and provide that scaffolds or support in order for them to be heard. I know that they are not proficient in English yet, but what supports can I provide in order for them to speak up and to share their thinking? Because I know they have thoughts, they have skills, but it's just the language. How do we provide that scaffold or support in order for them to be recognized as a contributing member of our community? And it's the same thing with our teachers. All our teachers bring in with assets. I have my navigational assets. I have my cultural assets. I have all these assets that I could share. But how can I utilize this in a way that I contribute to the community? So sometimes I also cross boundaries. Like when I'm not provided with the conditions that I need for me to share my expertise, I speak up. And it's the same thing with our teachers. I think we need to provide conditions for our teachers to show their assets, to show their strengths. And yes, our teachers are all different. They have strengths and challenges, but we have to capitalize on their strengths so that the weaknesses or challenges can be addressed. But really looking at the asset base to promote inclusivity, diversity, and equity is important.
Marisa, I love what you said. Right now, I'm taking like 10. I don't know where that background noise just came from. Sorry, guys. But I have like 10 Spanish speakers and then 4 others that speak different languages. And so we're constantly working on making sure there's equity, because the Spanish speakers just love to talk to each other a lot. And being new language learners, you know, that's an easy way for them to communicate. But so within my classroom, I constantly work on that equity piece by bringing in other languages, by bringing in, having everybody share their language. When we're learning something new, share it in your language. With the staff in the building, I reach out to them, because the kids I serve are very quiet within other classrooms. So come on in, honey. Sorry, I have a student walking in. So I'm always reaching out to other teachers to make sure that those students are being included, those students are being heard, those teachers know their background, and to make sure they're just not sitting in the classroom quietly and never being a part of a class. So I do make it my duty to make sure that these teachers know who they are and include them.
Thank you, Erica. Marisa, go ahead, Tree.
In terms of the inclusion and equity, I usually think of my students' weakness is also the strength that they can bring to the classroom and place on the table. And to do that, I would say create a safe environment where the students feel comfortable to share their weaknesses and strengths. So in my classroom, I have a poster saying that mistakes is okay during the learning process. So when the student make a mistake, I'm teaching math. So of course, there's a lot of mistakes or misconception. And we celebrate, we say, yes, we did make a mistakes on that. So find out. So we create an environment where the student feel comfortable to include it or to be equity for everyone to share their perspective, their own thinking about the problem. So that's the most important. I think I should create the environments where the student can share freely.
Thank you so much, Tree. Hannah, can I ask you to maybe pull some of those pieces together? You might have something else to add as well, but thinking about diversifying the educator workforce specifically, and thinking about the work of supporting teachers in their learning, how do we support teachers to capitalize on their strengths? How do we advocate with teachers within hierarchies of power in our school systems? How do we create those environments that celebrate mistakes and that see the weaknesses as strengths for our teachers, and thinking about our teacher workforce?
Julie, if I knew the answer to that question, we would not be in this.
You do. We're all working towards that, but I know you've got some thoughts on that.
Well, I was thinking, in the classrooms, diversity is not something we need to try to work towards. The diversity is already there. Our students, you look in any classroom and you'll see that. I think we're moving so much more forward with inclusion, like students' voices. I can't generalize that, but it seems that teachers, educators are working really hard to have voices being heard. I love what Marisa and Tree and Erica have touched upon is like the part about like the equity. I think it's the condition. Like, what are we doing as teachers? Or how can we as teachers create conditions where it's not only that students' voices are being heard, but they're being invited in and they are being, and like kind of the justice part of it is like, who is talking, but their ideas or voices aren't being accounted for. What are we doing as teachers or facilitators to evaluate that, I guess, in a way, and think about that. And the question, your original question about evaluation, I think is a big one. And I'm thinking about even like our PLC. I kind of wish I had done a better job of evaluating our community time of whose voices were being accounted for. And thinking about ways to even leverage our own colleagues to invite other staff members over. Like, I think, as teachers, we hold a certain position, as facilitators, we hold a position. There are some like kind of hierarchy conditions that we can't really sometimes escape. And for some cultures, that is more clear. And I think a participant in our video was talking about that. Like, students see teachers as like almost like gods in some cultures, or you're not to be talked back to in that way. And so if you are thinking about how to leverage voices and creating conditions, like could you utilize your other Spanish speaking students in the classroom to invite them and to have their voices shared and create that kind of condition and learning community. And I think, as Marissa said about what we teach our kids, we want to do also in our practice. And so could we do that with our own communities of educators, whether it would be staff or departments, inviting each other, asking each other to come and share and create that trust and relationship from educator to educator.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the work that all four of you have done to really invite people into these conversations and to build on their strengths and to advocate for themselves and for their learners and for the profession of teaching. I mean, you're incredible educators in the classroom and you're incredible facilitators and professional leaders in your communities. And we have just 4 minutes and 31 seconds remaining. So I want to ask each of you to take a minute and anything that you want to share with this community, anything you want people to be thinking about in terms of refugee education, inclusion, equity, diversity, professional learning communities, PGPs. You have 1 minute. Tree, your mic is on. You go first.
Okay. I wanted to add more about like teachers help teachers. I really appreciate all the PDs that we have, like teacher professional developments. I cannot imagine if my teaching life is miserable without the PDs. Without learnings, because as educators, we are long life learners. So I think all PDs opportunities are very important to me and very helpful to me. So I really appreciate for the opportunities for all PDs that we have.
My last word here is thank you, Trey. Diversity really starts from within. I would like to say, who is your most immediate neighbor in school? You have educator of color who is working in your building, and have you asked a question, and have you established partnership where you are able to recognize assets that your educator of color is bringing to the community? And because, this is about diversifying educator workforce, you really take action to diversify from within, because based on research, it's 5 times harder to find a new, customer than to retain your teacher. So how would you retain? How would you empower your educator of color who is already there? How many community members or partners does that educator of color already have? And build that coalition so that the diversifying is happening within.
To build on to what Tree was saying earlier too, is to encourage teachers to educate themselves. Yes, we might use the word refugee, but every student is so different, and where they come from, the cultures they come from are so different. So to educate ourselves as much as we can about where our students come from and the cultures they come from is so important. And then a little push, refugee-run restaurants in Tukwila, the Spice Bridge, come enjoy them.
Thanks for the weekend plans, Erica. I think one thing that we, maybe Julie, I think didn't say, I don't know if you did, I'm sorry, but to give a little bit of context, some of the PGP members in our last cohort did like a 6-month online education learning of refugee backgrounds. And I bring that up because I think there's a kind of a correlation there. The participants who participated in that and built their awareness and wanted to learn about refugee backgrounds had PGPs that reflected more of kind of the stance of becoming a learner as a teacher, as a counselor, as administrator, in whatever capacity that they were doing. They really had PGP centered on like, who are these students? What are their stories? What can I learn from them? And I felt that they really repositioned families or refugee students or immigrant students away from this kind of beneficiary idea and said, I've got a lot to learn and ways to build relationships with them. And that was I think that was a big takeaway, was that educators, when they choose to learn about communities or cultures other than their own and their experiences, it centers differently, I think, compared to some of the participants who are also in great ways thinking about ways to engage, but in a lens of like maybe what they've learned from practice, from like, this is a great way to engage students in math. Whereas another group was thinking, here are my students, here's what I know about them. So I'm going to use this to drive my engagement or my instruction. That was really powerful.
Thank you so much for that, Hannah. And thank you all so much for making time today in this busy end of the school year to share your experience with this PGP. And our community is always growing. And I invite people who've been listening to join our community and to be part of the work and to grow your own community and engage in that sustained lifelong learning. Thank you very much. And we'll see you in the next sessions.